Hello everyone, this is Loftus, and I'm here to share with you a bit of detail and insight into updating the game I've made. To catch people up a bit, I released the game Laser Defender on the Apple and Android stores a few months ago. It was originally part of a game development course using the Unity game engine. The course material itself taught how to build the game, but the end result was essentially a demo or a platform to build upon. I extended upon this and made it into a game that I was happy to share with others via mobile storefronts. After receiving feedback, I took a break to work on other projects. Then I recently made a start on an update for the game. Some parts went well, others ended up being problematic. The end result is that my update has been published but no longer on mobile. I've decided to publish my game to itch.io, a popular website for indie game developers. I wanted to discuss the process of updating the game, what I learnt from it and why I made the decision to move the game away from mobile. To start with, I aimed at some quality of life changes. It's been a couple of months since I last worked on the game, and it was a good way to re-familiarise myself with the codebase and what decisions I had made previously. My first task was to fix a bug that occurred when changing between menus, causing the music to restart. Realistically, I imagine nobody else experienced or noticed this, but it was something I was aware of when first releasing the game. I was originally unsure how to fix the issue, so made it my first priority when starting on the update. I feel that my next task would have a much bigger impact on players, and it was heavily driven by feedback. In the original release of the game, health was a number display in the top left of the screen. This was implemented as part of the course and something I didn't question at the time. Why I didn't question it was because I was being told about its purpose. The instructor explained what it was and why we were doing it, so it didn't seem odd to me. This was a great reminder of how, without the same thought process as the developer, user interfaces need to be clearer and provide recognisable features and patterns. It provided poor information to the player, and many people commented that they were unsure why they were dying in the game when they were. I deemed this an important issue to resolve and replaced the health number with a more traditional health bar. It's rudimentary, but health bars are such a common design pattern that it hopefully is more intuitive for players to realise what it represents. Following on from the health bar, the next task I took on was the addition of a pause menu. I felt that the pause menu was a vital feature in an action-based game, and I had a solid idea of the kind of menu that I wanted to display when the game was paused. The key design issue I felt was in a game where you can move anywhere on the screen, where do I put the pause button? At this point in time, I was still working with the idea of mobile in mind, and as such I had to provide a button that could be pressed somewhere on the screen without obscuring the player at any point in time or becoming a nuisance. I made the decision to place the button centrally at the top of the screen and combined it with a limit to how far up the screen a player can move. Since implementing this feature and making the change to the game being browser based, I most certainly could have replaced the button with a key command, but I don't feel it gets in the way in its current form. The last of the quality of life changes involve implementing a kill tracker, which shows the player how many of each type of enemy they've defeated during a playthrough. This was a task that was not based on feedback, nor was it something that was originally planned, but I've always liked it when games present you with tallies of enemies that you've defeated, and I feel it allows the player to feel a bit more impressive than to simply see a final score value. I wanted to do quite a major overhaul to how the game actually played, with the core focus being to change the game from its existing state, where completing a set number of levels and defeating a final boss type enemy would complete the game. The arcade feel of the game, tied in with the score system, made me feel like the game would be better suited to become an endless experience, in which the player progresses through levels as before, but once the final boss is defeated, the game essentially repeats, increasing difficulty. In order to achieve this, first of all I knew I had to give players more than one health bar. Mistakes would have been punished too heavily with the original amount of health provided to the player, and so I added the concept of lives to the game. My hope is that this can keep players in the game for longer rather than quick failures occurring. To compensate for the extra health these lives would provide, I made a modification so that health is not restored after completing each stage like it was previously. Health now only restores when defeating the final boss, which hopefully can provide some tension when approaching the final stage of a gameplay cycle. There was quite a lot of work involved in making this change, and I wanted to make sure it felt balanced and fun to play. I had feedback from some players saying that the game was too hard, while others said that they didn't feel like they had to do too much to survive. In making the game endless, I also shortened each level of the first playthrough. With the combination of this change and the introduction of lives, I'm hoping that players who find the game more difficult can stay alive for longer and see more of the game, while players who found the game a bit too easy can quickly progress through to harder levels, facing larger number of dangerous enemies. Each time the game is completed, enemy health and speed increase, along with the number of enemies that spawn in each wave and how many will attack the player at once. There is quite a bit of randomisation involved in the way each level is set up, and so each playthrough should remain interesting and provide different challenges. I also implemented bonus lives to be awarded to the player after every 50,000 points they earn. While playtesting this, I felt it helped provide more of a risk and reward type structure, with the player having to decide whether to play more cautiously and not take as much damage, or play more aggressively and earn more points to gain an extra life. At this point, the gameplay felt a lot better to me. I was really happy with the development and changes, and this had all been done in about a week. The final, and what felt to me to be the most ambitious task, was to implement leaderboards that a few people had requested. On the surface of it, a leaderboard sounds like a simple thing to design and implement. Save a player's score when they finish a run, display it to everyone, and show who's done the best. The issue lies in how I both get and display that information. One approach would be to integrate with Facebook, but I don't like the idea of forcing people who play my game to be signed up to Facebook, so I wanted to avoid going down that route. I had the idea of players simply entering in their names themselves, but Laser Defender is a game that I wanted to be available to everyone, and as soon as you allow people free reign over data entry, I faced the potential risk of having language entered on the leaderboard that was unsuitable for minors, shall we say. I then found out that you can connect directly through Android or iPhone, and I found an external API called CloudOnce, which looks to do a lot of the heavy lifting and setup. The idea is that it would grab your name through your store account and display that, preventing any abuse within the leaderboards. The code to implement CloudOnce was actually very straightforward. The API looks to be well built and is easy to use. The roadblock that I hit was in fact with the storefronts themselves. The longest part of originally developing Laser Defender came from the final stages of publishing the game to Android and iPhone. I first started working on the game on the 12th of May. I had the game in a working state by the 2nd of June. But to get it published on the mobile storefronts took me up until the 23rd of July, meaning it took me just 21 days to create the first complete version of the game and a whopping 51 more to perform device testing and deployment for mobile devices. In this instance, in order to implement leaderboards using the built-in systems provided by Android and iPhone, I had to go through a new process for each, separate from my game. I started with the Android version and looked to implement what they refer to as game services. These are a whole bunch of extra steps required to set this up, which I had never done before. To make matters worse, the developer console, which you use to manage these game services, was updated last month, and even in their own documentation, it has not been updated to reflect these changes. The whole console has been overhauled, with many menus being changed or removed, and a lot of terms that are mentioned in the guide simply don't exist anymore. This had the knock-on effect of invalidating the vast majority of user-generated tutorials as well, as they were all using the old versions of the Android console. Even tutorials made by people earlier this year were now out of date. Up to this point, for all the other changes and features I had implemented for this update, I had spent just over a week. 2 weeks on from that point, I found myself still struggling to get the game services to work for Android, becoming more and more frustrated without anywhere to turn for help. I hadn't even begun to perform the changes required for publishing to iPhone. I had spent 2 weeks trying to get game services to work, not actually writing code for my game or adding any new features, knowing that there was more inevitably to come. It was at that point that I stopped, took a step back and asked myself, what is it worth? What do I want out of this? I never intended to develop for mobile. It was something that happened in the moment and made sense for my specific game. But my longer term goal has always been to develop for PC and consoles. I weighed up the pros and the cons and thought the core thing here is to make games. That's what I want to do, and mobile development provided far too many blockers for my progress. I looked around and thought of itch.io, a website I've used in the past but never really looked into too deeply. I looked at the publishing process for the website and it seemed so much more developer friendly than the mobile storefronts I've been spending ages wrestling with before. The leaderboard and the associated updates, along with device testing and the hurdles of publishing to mobile, just no longer seem worth it. I decided to give itch.io a try, and after some development tweaks, just 48 hours later the game, along with its update, has been published to the site. Although I don't have the leaderboard I'd hoped to implement, I do have what I believe to be a greatly improved game, and I found a new place to host my games that cuts out the stress of publishing and allows me to focus on the most important thing, which is making games. I guess the moral here that I would like to share with people is that if you're faced with a problem, it's good to try to persevere, but it's important to routinely reevaluate and ask yourself why you're making the decisions you are. Ultimately, I want to make games, and the new approach of publishing to itch.io allows me to do that with less issues. No matter how far down the path you've gone, it's never too late to turn back, and I'm so happy with the decision I've made. I'm looking forward to being able to focus on developing games again. I'll provide links in the description to my itch.io pages, along with my Twitter for anyone interested in more regular, bite-sized updates on what I'm working on and how it's going. Thank you all for watching, and to anyone that tries out the game. I hope my experience can provide a useful life lesson to people, and I look forward to providing more content for you all soon. Until next time.